All across Missouri, our new car and truck dealers are building strong local economies. When you buy a car or truck in Missouri, you're helping to support over 20,000 Missouri families who rely on the auto industry for good-paying local jobs. You're also helping fund our communities, schools, first responders, and our roads because dealers generate millions of dollars in tax revenue. Missouri's automobile dealers have been the foundation of our communities for generations and for generations to come. The Missouri Automobile Dealers Association, the heart of Missouri.
Welcome to This Week in Missouri Politics. This week we are joined by one of the most anticipated interviews we've ever had on the show and somebody that we've wanted a long time. So we're very happy to have the Treasurer of the City of St. Louis, Treasurer Tishaura Jones. Welcome.
Thank you for having me.
Very glad to have you here. Very topical. I know that I've wondered this, and I think a lot of our readers have. Your opinion, one of the most articulate members of the St. Louis community. Can you tell us what's happening in Baltimore and how that corresponds to St. Louis?
Great, thanks again. Well, I would start with there are a lot of similarities between Baltimore and St. Louis. People may or may not know that Baltimore was also a city that used to have state control of its police department and was one of the last cities to get local control as well, just before St. Louis. They have again, there's two cities there. There's the haves and the have-nots. And the similarities, in my opinion, between Baltimore and St. Louis are both cities have abject poverty and have not had a chance to really address what's going on in minority communities. You can't just say the black community, but minority communities. You've seen in the articles that the police have paid out enormous amounts of money settling lawsuits for citizens, citizens that they've targeted. And so those, I think, are the similarities. But you look at that, and that's any urban city. That's Philadelphia, that's Atlanta, that's Washington, D.C., it's any urban city is going to have that problem when you don't deal with the poverty that people experience. And not just poverty just in money, but poverty in education systems, poverty in economic systems. Once you address the issues of poverty in all of those systems, I think you get a chance to get out of what's going to happen again. It's going to happen again.
So from a governmental standpoint, now that these things are happening, the mayor of Baltimore has been widely criticized for not protecting the city, giving space, not protecting the protesters even. What is your take on the way the mayor has handled that situation?
I think that she has handled this situation with extreme grace under pressure, because it's easy for us to sit back and say, well, if I was mayor, I would do X, Y, and Z.
What if you were mayor?
I don't know, because I'm not in her shoes. However, I've been praying for this sister since this has started, because it's not an easy place to be in. It's probably not an easy place for our mayor to be in, or the mayor of Ferguson, whether we agree or disagree with how he's handled it. And a lot of people disagree. However, it's easy for us to criticize and judge how she handled it, but we were not in her shoes. We don't know the information she was given, when it was given to her, who's around her, who's in her camp advising her. And it's a hard place to be in, to try to balance and represent the interests of everybody that you represent.
It seems like there's a consensus amongst most policymakers that a protest is something that should be protected, maybe even encouraged, until it becomes violent. The minute it becomes violent, however you phrase that, the minute the protest becomes violent, do you have to shut it down, or what do you do then? That seems to be the question, that the decision point when there's people have different opinions.
Well, look at protests in the past, or even celebrations in the past. We can look at University of Kentucky and how they protested when their team lost, or any sports team when their team either won or lost.
Sure, any protest, wherever it is.
Exactly. So you give people space to protest because that's their constitutional right to freedom of speech. However, you do also have to protect the property that and the people. So that's a delicate balancing act.
I can tell you that if the Cardinals win the World Series this fall, I'll need protection, and others will from myself. So someone will have to step in, you know.
Right.
Kind of look at another topic. There's this iconic image of a mother scolding her son for, I don't know what he did, but maybe the thought was he was part of the looting or the violence. You are, you're very open about being a mother, raising your son that we all follow on Twitter,
Yes,
Stuff Aiden Says.
Stuff Aiden Says.
Stuff Aiden Says. What was your take of that image, and what did that mean to you?
That mother did what she had to do to protect her son. And I don't think that any parent would have done anything any differently. She told him to stay home, and he went out anyway. And she has been trying to protect her family, all of her children, and didn't want them to be a victim of violence or a victim of police violence. So if I were in her shoes, I honestly probably would have done the same thing.
Very interesting. The minute I saw that image, I thought of you and wanted to ask you this question on the show. Mm-hmm. You mentioned some of the underlying issues that brought on these protests and riots or whatever. Right. One issue the General Assembly is trying to attack is court reform. Mm-hmm. Currently, there's a Senate proposal that cuts it 10%, the House maybe 15%. 15%, right. What's your take on the whole thing? You've been in the House, you know what those fights are like. Right. How important is this as a step towards addressing those issues?
Municipal court reform is an important step, but it's not going to solve everything. Mm-hmm. The work that the Ferguson Commission is doing in addressing the police and their training, addressing, of course, municipal court reform, and within that, there's the failure to appear charge, and that's what racks up the fees that people have to pay. So it's an important step, but we also have to look at how we are organized as a region and all these municipalities that we have. We have 91, 92 municipalities. Each has their own mayor, their own board of aldermen, and all 58 of them have their own police departments, their own fire departments. All of that becomes expensive, and it's duplication of services. And we have to really look at how we restructure that. I know a lot of people don't want to lose their position. People talk about if St. Louis re-enters the county as another municipality, I might lose my position. Well, I'm okay with that. I have skills. I can go get another job. Mm-hmm. It's not about the position. It's about having the possibility for me to find another job to protect my family. So whether or not I'm treasurer in another 5 or 6 years, that's not important. What's important is, am I using this position to do what's right for the people that I represent?
Speaking of how you use your position, you've been a leader in financial empowerment. You've taken this job and done more. I don't think anybody that ever had in Missouri had saw a position used like this. Tell us about your work in financial empowerment.
Great. So when I ran for this office, I looked around the country to see what other treasurers were doing with their offices, and we saw quite a few start to get into financial empowerment or addressing the issue of the unbanked. A lot of people don't know that St. Louis is one of the most unbanked cities in the country. We were #1 back in 2011, and right now we're still in the top 5. And what being unbanked means is that you don't use a bank or a credit union to pay your bills, to do financial services. And the unbanked or underbanked, meaning that they still use payday or title lending to plug the gap, the unbanked spend $1,200 a year just to get access to their money.
And those that don't probably have $1,200 to spend on that.
Right, right. And $1,200 a year, that's $100 a month. That's groceries for a lot of people. And so we are trying to address that issue by working with the banking and credit union community to see if they can offer products that are geared towards the poor, because a lot of reasons why people don't have bank accounts is because they get caught up in the late or the fees for bouncing checks. Mm-hmm. And that racks up, and then they get put in the check system and can't get another bank account. So we're trying to find different vehicles, different bank solutions or credit union solutions or second chance checking accounts to allow people to get banking services. And the other part of that, in my opinion, children are our biggest investment. And we are starting a children's savings account program in the fall with every child entering a public school and kindergarten will get a $50 account funded by the Treasurer's office and will get performance-based incentives to watch that account grow, like perfect attendance, like parents' participation in financial education, as well as the other incentive, public.
Of all these things, are these some of the things that you were a state legislator before you were the treasurer?
Right.
Are these some of the things you learned as a state legislator?
Some of the things I learned as a state legislator, yes. The way that we have conducted business in the Treasurer's office, we've been very transparent. And in the state legislature, you have to be transparent. Everything that you do becomes a part of state record. So we have put everything that we do out on our website, out on the city's website, every bid, every RFP, every RFQ, everything goes out on the city's website to make sure that we are transparent in our operations. Speaking
of your old Stallman grads in Jefferson City, is Chris Coster going to be the next governor?
I honestly believe so. Chris is a good friend and he's a great attorney general. He's done some great things in that office. I honestly believe that he will be the next governor, and however will remain to see what his agenda is for poor and minority communities. That's what I'm most concerned about, but we'll have a chance to talk to him soon enough.
Speaking of who's going to be the next, one of the most talked about things in Missouri politics is your future and what you're going to do next. And let's just click the list off. Were you offered the state auditor position?
I heard that I was on the short list. I was not officially offered the state auditor position. It was an honor to be considered, given the tragic death of Tom Schweik. However, my mantra is politics is local. And I feel like I have a lot of important work to do here with my community here with St. Louis, and then also raising Aiden. And so I just felt it was more important to stay here.
You're always mentioned as somebody that might potentially be a top recruit to run for Congress. Is that something that's on your mind?
Not at all. Not at all.
Not at all. You serve in the executive branch of the city with one of the most popular politicians in the state, Francis Slay. At some point, is the mayor's office something you might look to do down the road?
Possibly down the road, but I don't think I would challenge the mayor.
Sure.
That's a difficult. He has a lot of money, and I don't. But money isn't everything, as seen by my race to become treasurer.
You know, an interesting question that was posed to me when I mentioned that you were going to come on was, supposing Hillary Clinton becomes president of the United States, that'll be a historic administration. You have a lot of governing chops that would make you someone that they might want to draft into the executive branch. Is a job in that administration something you would consider?
I would consider it. It would be historic. It would definitely be historic. And I travel a lot to Washington, D.C., so being there wouldn't be, something that's totally alien to me.
Sure.
Yeah.
Well, as these opportunities come, we look forward to having you back on This Week in Missouri Politics, and thank you for joining us today.
Thank you for having me.
And we'll be right back with our Opinion Maker panel.
All across Missouri, our new car and truck dealers are building strong local economies. When you buy a car or truck in Missouri, you're helping to support over 20,000 Missouri families who rely on the auto industry for good-paying local jobs. You're also helping fund our communities, schools, first responders, and our roads, because dealers generate millions of dollars in tax revenue. Missouri's automobile dealers have been the foundation of our communities for generations and for generations to come. The Missouri Automobile Dealers Association, the heart of Missouri.
Welcome back to This Week in Missouri Politics. We're now joined by our Opinion Maker panel, starting with former representative from South County, St. Louis, potential senator maybe candidate,
Yeah.
Vicki Englund.
Thanks.
Current representative, rising star in the Republican Party, Robert Cornejo.
Thanks for having me.
Katie Casas, education maven, Gateway Group, now master of all tasks, right?
Yes.
Runs the Jeff City Rotunda. And we have James Harris, very good friend of mine, also head of the J. Harris Company and one of the men that turned me on to Pocket Squares. So I'm very grateful.
Thank you.
But we'll start with Katie. What did you think of the interview by Tishaura? What especially did you think about her take on the mother scolding her son for being out?
Sure. Well, I've always been a big fan of Tishaura's, so I thought she did a great job. Her response to the scene with the mother in Baltimore, I think was right on. I mean, that looked to me, I'm a mother, that looked to me like a mother who was terrified for what might happen to her son if she didn't get him out of there. I don't know if it's how I would have reacted. I can't put myself in that mother's shoes, but she struck me as a mother who was terrified for her child.
Vicki Englund, you're a mother yourself. What'd you think?
Well, you know, as a mother, we have to take a lot of things into consideration. You know, part of what we do every day is trying to do what's best for our kids, and sometimes we get to plan stuff like that out. Sometimes we have to react in a moment's notice, and I think, you know, that reaction is what we do as mothers to protect our kids.
Representative, Tishaura Jones used to serve in your body. She gave unqualified endorsement to Coster. She's not running for Congress. What's the politics of that?
I don't quite know. I didn't have the honor of serving with Tishaura, but I know she's a smart, capable person, very well liked on both sides of the aisle. And so,
Do you think she was offered that state auditor position? I think she might have been.
I think she was definitely on the short list as far as, you know, it's hard to get any responses out of the governor's office, so I can't really speculate on that.
James Harris, consummate insider. Was she offered the job?
I don't know. I suspect if she had been, she would have accepted it. So
You think so?
I do.
Would it have been the right move if she'd accepted that?
It would have been a great way to raise her profile to a statewide level if she ever wanted to be a candidate, maybe for the United States Senate or may run for Congress in a couple of years. It'd be a good way to have a larger platform.
Seems to me like she's going to step into some very large shoes to follow maybe in 5-6 years of Mayor Slay. And that's the logical progression. Speaking of people's future, the biggest news in Missouri politics this week was Mike Parson declaring he's running for governor. First, two questions now that we have you on here, James, very fortuitously. Any truth that you may be involved in that campaign?
I'm taking a look at it. I think he's a great candidate. I think he's going to connect very well with Republican voters around the state. You know, our last two governors have come from Southwest Missouri, and if you look at where the Republican base is, you know, the Springfield television market's kind of an increasing share of the total Republican vote statewide. So I think he's in a very good spot, connects with a lot of traditional Republicans around the state.
Representative Cornejo, there's a lot of noises the human body can make that are not yes. That was not a yes, but it wasn't a no, right?
Correct, yeah.
So
yeah.
Where does Senator Parson, where does he fit in this field?
Well, yeah, you know, 2 weeks ago or so I was on this show earlier expressing how great and qualified Senator Parsons is. You know, I think it works out geographically for him with all the other primary contenders being from the St. Louis area typically. He's a great person. I don't think anybody down in Jeff City has a bad word to say about him, and I think you know, he's going to appeal to the Republican primary voters very well.
Katie, what do you think? You've worked with him on several different issues. The Republican field, where does he fit in? And is the Southwest Missouri thing, is that the advantage that actually makes him the one to beat?
You know, I think Senator Parson has been a great senator to work with. He knows how to bring people together. I would never, ever underestimate Senator Parson and anything he wanted to do.
Is there a nicer person in Jefferson City with more integrity?
Not that I can think of. I will say that it's hard to say how he fits into the field because I don't think the field's entirely set yet. And so, you know, somebody else could emerge from Southwest Missouri, somebody else could emerge from St. Louis or Kansas City. I think it's a little too early for us to say who's going to emerge from the Republican primary at this point.
Representative Englund, I'm going to step out on a limb here and say there might be a Coster yard sign earmarked for your yard in South County, St. Louis. If you look at the all prosecutor, no politics, he's a sheriff. How does that play up against Chris Coster?
Well, I think what you're looking at right now is there is a lot of folks throwing their hat on the Republican side. It kind of shows sort of a lack of organization, a lot of people trying to compete against each other, kind of fracturing the Republican Party. So as Katie said, you know, that field isn't set yet. I think Attorney General Coster is our strong candidate. He's been our strong candidate for a long time, and I look forward to supporting him as governor.
James, one thing that's interesting, you've ran the tactical part of some of these campaigns. A sheriff in a rural county has 50 patronage jobs. All the local media has to be very close to them because that's where the news most people care about comes from. As a former sheriff, can he turn those on? And is that a secret advantage he may have that nobody's talking about?
Well, I think being a county sheriff, they're often the most respected elected official locally. There's a professional network around the state. So I definitely think that. And they also have to, they have certain attributes that are good for governors. They have to make snap decisions. Snap decisions when people are fighting, you might not have all the details, and you have to fix a problem quickly. You can't just do like they might in the legislature, you know, kick the ball down the field or wait. So I think it is a very good skill set.
I just think in some of these rural counties where they all vote Republican, there may be a county sheriff that doesn't normally get involved in a race like this. His involvement could actually be a very tangible tactical advantage.
It is, and if you, he also has ag contacts around the state.
Right to farm issue, he was the face of that.
And he's also, the good thing about being in the legislature to contrast with some of the other candidates is he's the only guy with a voting record. You know, the only guy that can stand up in the Republican field.
Is that a problem though?
But he can say, I'm the only person who's a consistent supporter of the Second Amendment or certain other issues.
Representative Cornejo, you cast votes every day. Do you worry how some of them could play 5 years from now in an unknown political environment? Is that voting record a handicap?
No, you know, I think when I go down to Jeff City, I represent my constituents, and I've passed laws that benefit the whole state, but I also am responsible to the people back in my district, and I don't really look down the years down the road to see how that may affect me. So
if he wins the primary, he'll run against a very top-tier candidate, Chris Koster. You'll have to win that race in places like St. Charles County. Can Mike Parson hit the number he needs to hit to be elected governor in St. Charles County?
Yes, you know, I think he may have some key allies in St. Charles County that will help bring him that vote.
And I'd also add, the last two Republican governors have come from Southwest Missouri, and the last governor, when they were elected Republican, carried Southwest Missouri, or the 7th Congressional District, by 110,000 votes.
Do you have something to do with that by chance?
I might have.
Might have.
The last gubernatorial candidate carried it by 30,000 Republican. So I think having a candidate from that neck of the woods probably helps the Republican achieve success in November.
You worried yet?
Oh, not at all. I mean, 2016 is going to be another historic turnout year. As Tishaura mentioned in the interview before, you know, there's a possibility we cut up our first female president. That's going to get a lot more people motivated, and whether they're from the southern or southeastern, southwestern part of the state, or from the entire state. I think you're going to see voter turnout historical here in Missouri.
Kind of going to the legislative end, the state Senate passed a gas tax this week after a lot of debate. Can you give us the rundown on what is that? What does that do?
Sure. The bill as it was filed was a 2-cent increase every year for the next 3 years. Senator Leibla, who you got to hand it to Senator Leibla, I think there was some serious doubt in the lobby corps that it was going to get done yesterday in the Senate.
He's bringing a pretty impressive legislative resume.
He sure is, and he's got a lot of tenacity. So I think he stood up and defended what ultimately ended up being a 2-cent increase for just the coming year. And I guess that debate lasted from around 10:30 until they adjourned at 3, and Senator Leibla was on his feet most of that time with some help from his colleague from Franklin County, Senator Schatz.
What will this accomplish?
It would not solve all of our road problems, but it would put a huge dent in them. And you know, there's I think some angst on the other side of the building about whether or not they can also get it done with only 9 or so legislative days left. But we have a road problem. We have a serious road problem in this state, and I got to hand it to Senator Leibla and Senator Richard for giving him the time to do it with only 9 legislative days left. And that's the kind of lawmaking that you know, I think the citizens of Missouri like to see, whether they agree with it or not. It was really hashed out on the Senate floor, and important decisions were made.
Vicki Englund, if you're in the House, would you support this?
You know, I've seen a lot of different proposals. I understand that this one that's been the compromise doesn't really even cover the inflation rate on that. So I'd really have to take a look at all the proposals and see. I know, you know, there's a lot of horse trading, as we talked about before the show, and so I would have to take a closer look at it.
Robert Cornejo, does this pass the House of Representatives?
Yes, you know, I think it has a tough road. You got to work the votes, but I think ultimately it does pass.
Is there a gentleman from Butler that he's not worried about that 9 days because he moves the previous question?
Yes.
James Harris, what's the politics on this?
Well, I think if you noticed in the Senate yesterday, almost all of your statewide candidates that are looking to run statewide voted no.
That was noticed.
And it was a bipartisan vote with all the Democrats and just enough Republicans. I think you'll see something similar in the House. I think everyone's cognizant, as Kate said, that we have a problem, and we do have one of the largest state-maintained road systems in the country. if we don't increase some of our funds, we lose federal matching funds. So it's one of those practical things. State government has to build roads and fund roads. So I think
how's that different from Medicaid, though? Are we losing money on Medicaid if we don't expand Medicaid?
I think Medicaid's more of an ideological issue where transportation, you have a lot of Republicans that support it. So I think that's the main difference.
Senator Lively, he's building a resume of stopping legislation and now passing legislation that's pretty impressive.
He is, and he was a businessman before, and you can tell he gets to the bottom of problems. He's not here in Jefferson City to just be there. He wants to get some stuff done. You're seeing it.
A lot of times, though, when those guys get elected with no legislative experience, no political experience, they don't take to it like he has. He's taken to it with a very pragmatic approach that's actually working. That's been an interesting twist on his career.
You've seen some that have become frustrated and kind of angry the last year or two in the legislature, but he's been doing a great job getting to know people, reaching across the aisles, trying to figure solutions out.
Katie, this week was a big week for education. Ball moved further down the road. We could not have you on and not ask you, what's the status of that, and does a bill reach the governor's desk that he'll sign?
So the conference committee finished up their work this week. I think, after probably 10 hours, a conference committee was unusual in that they really made all their decisions in public. There was no private conference committee meeting. You're out to hand it to Representative Wood. He really, as he likes to say, herded cats and kept the frogs in the wheelbarrow all at the same time. Whether the governor signs it, if somebody tells you they know what he's going to do.
Well, he said he was going to come and communicate with the legislature more, right? I was there in the room.
Yeah, and he has. To his credit, he has communicated with Senate leadership in particular on this issue, stayed in contact with them through his staff, and so I'm hopeful that he will. I'm hopeful that first we got to get a vote on the conference committee report next week, and that's where my focus will be.
You've been on the inside of this. Does this happen?
Well, I served on the conference committee last year. I know that some of the same parts of the bill that people didn't like last year have been taken out or at least modified in the version this year. It's hard to say. We weren't also working with just 9 legislative days left. I believe we didn't have that many more days when we came through with it, but it's a tough one. What we do know is that if something isn't done, the kids in our public schools are the ones who are going to pay the price. So I'm looking forward to seeing some compromise come to fruition this year.
Representative Cornejo, does this pass?
I believe so. I think everybody's goal is to get kids the best education they can, as closest to home, and I think we'll do something.
Are you going to have to get a new chair in your office from the governor wearing it out, communicating with you like you said he was?
I'm not big in the education issue, so he hasn't come and talked with me about it, but on some other issues that are pretty big this session, his office has come and talked. So to his credit, he has been engaging more this year.
James, does this get done, and does the governor actually sign it? What does this mean? What does it mean for the governor if he doesn't sign this bill?
Well, I think it's one of the most important issues that the legislature needs to wrap up, and there is a long ways to go in 9 days. And I think one of the concerning things is the price tag on the bill that could create hiccups in the last 9 days with all the other things that have been added in. But it's important. I never can guess what this governor is going to do, since he really doesn't communicate as a normal administration does with certain red flags as the legislation's moving, but we'll see. I think he would be hard-pressed to veto it.
It would seem to be that he took a lot of heat for vetoing the last one. This one would be the pressure would mount after last fall.
Yes.
And I want to leave it right there. This week in Missouri Politics, and we'll see you again right here.